Hello everyone, it's Scott. We're back for day 7 of Tarkir Dragonstorm Preview season. So we got a lot of interesting cards to talk about today. I think some that are going to have real standard playability. But before we do, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Tarkir Dragonstorm Spoiler season and beyond. And if you're looking for some cards from the set, you can check us out on the web at caffeinatedgamers.tcgplayerpro.com to get all the Tarkir Dragonstorm cards that you might need. All right, so let's get into today's previews. So the first is Call of the Spirit Dragons. For one of each color of mana, you get an enchantment, and dragons you control have indestructible. And at the beginning of your upkeep, for each color, put a +1/+1 counter on a dragon you control of that color. If you put +1/+1 counters on 5 dragons this way, you win the game. So really kind of interesting build. And we know right now in standard there's very good mana. So I don't think this is beyond the ability of a deck to get to. Now, is it going to happen, early in the game? No. But as a late game option, I think this is certainly something that could happen in a Dragons deck. And I do like the fact that every single turn you're going to give a dragon of each different color that +1/+1 counter. So I think in our domain style decks, I think this really does have a chance of seeing some standard play. Next, we've got Revival of the Ancestors. For 1, a white, a black, and a green mana. You get a saga. On Chapter 1, you get to create 3 1/1 white spirit creature tokens. On Chapter 2, you get to distribute 3 +1/+1 counters among 1, 2, or 3 target creatures you control. And then on Chapter 3, creatures you control gain trample and lifelink until end of turn. So I think this is a very playable saga in standard. Obviously, it'll need to be in an Abzan deck, but this is definitely a playable card given what it's doing. It's going to give you 3 bodies for 4 mana. It's going to get you 3 +1/+1 counters, and on Chapter 3 is going to give the trample and lifelink, all of which are really solid abilities. So I think this is maybe the best saga we've seen so far from the set. Next, we have Scavenger Region. For 3 and a black mana, you get a dragon. That's a 4/4 with flying and ward of discard a card. And it also has an Omen, Exodus, Toxin. For X and 2 black mana, you get a sorcery. Each non-dragon creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. So I think really, this is basically Meat Hook Massacre, and we know that was really good in standard. Now, obviously, you're not getting the advantage of the enchantment that gains life and causes your opponent to lose life when things happen in the game. But on its surface, I think Exodus Toxin is a very good omen, and one that I believe black decks will want to be playing, especially if you're going to be playing dragons in your deck, because then it just becomes a natural way to clean the board of your opponent's non-dragons, and you get to keep your creatures. So powerful ability in standard. So I think this is one that if we do have a deck in black that's going to be playing dragons, I think this is definitely one of the ones we'll see. Next, we've got Windcrag Siege. For 1, a red and a white mana, you get an enchantment. And as this enchantment enters the battlefield, you get to choose Mardu or Jeskai. If you choose Mardu, if a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So if you've got a lot of triggered abilities on creatures that you have, then this is really nice, where you're going to get those twice. Or on the Jeskai side, at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 goblin creature token. It gains lifelink and haste until end of turn. So I think this is a good card just on its surface value, because basically every turn you're going to be creating a 1/1 red goblin creature token. And I think there's definitely decks that will want that in standard, that ability. Hey, I'm going to be able to put a 1/1 creature on the battlefield every time until you kill this enchantment. And in decks, when you're playing against a lot of sweepers, this is a great card because yes, they may kill it, but the next turn you're going to get another one. And then the turn after that, you're going to get another one. And it's just that recursive nature of this that I think is a really powerful ability. So I think this is going to see, potentially in a Boros deck. This will be a card that those decks will be looking to play in standard. Next, we've got Dragon Fire Blade for 1 mana. You get an equipment, that's an artifact. And equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has hexproof from mono-colored. So no mono-colored spells can affect the creature, which I think is a powerful ability in standard. Now, the downside of it is the equip cost of 4, but really because of the cost reduction here, this ability costs 1 less to activate for each color of the creature it targets. So if you're, a 2-colored creature, now it's just 2 to go ahead and attach it. Obviously if it's a 1, it's 3 to attach, so it's not great. But I believe this is definitely something that is a sideboard card in some of our standard decks, particularly if you're playing against a lot of spot removal, because almost all the spot removal that we see right now is in 1 color. Next, we've got Nature's Rhythm for X and 2 green mana. You get a sorcery, and you get to search your library for a creature card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So a nice animation spell here, where instead of reanimating something out of your graveyard, you're getting to animate something out of your deck. Now, obviously, and we're going to probably want to ramp into something like this so that you can just go get whatever card it is. And the fact that it does not matter what the mana value of that creature is, other than you have to meet the requirement that X is that mana. This allows you to play anything, basically. So the mana you're putting into it beyond the 2 green, it really doesn't matter beyond that. So you can go get anything, an Atrexa or whatever, as long as you've got enough mana to support that. It also has Harmonize for X and 4 green mana, which means you may cast this card from your graveyard for its Harmonized cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by an amount of generic mana equal to its power, then exile this spell. And the fact that you can reuse this with the Harmonize ability, and you're probably going to hopefully get something that's a 5 power or something like that, so you can reduce the Harmonize cost on this pretty efficiently, I think. So because of that, I think this has got an outside chance of seeing standard play. Next, we've got Lacid Prowler for 2 and 2 green mana. You get a Snake Ranger, that's a 5/5. And when this creature enters the battlefield, you may mill cards equal to the number of lands you control. So that's a may ability, so you don't have to do that. It also has Renew for 1 and a green mana. You can exile this card from your graveyard and put X +1/+1 counters on target creature, where X is the number of land cards in your graveyard. Activate only as a sorcery. So I think this is designed to go in a graveyard banner decks, where you're milling things into the graveyard. Obviously, the Prowler does that naturally when it comes into play. You can mill, probably a minimum of 3 or 4 cards. And I'm saying 3 or 4 simply because, we've got Lionel Elf and other things to reduce the mana cost for things. So there's a possibility you play this on turn 3 because of the mana dorks that you have in play. And I think this is definitely playable in standard. Now, is it going to beat other things in green at the 4-drop spot? I don't know, but it's certainly in those mill decks. I think is an interesting way to get cards into your graveyard, and then later you kind of get a reward when this dies, and you get those +1/+1 counters on a different creature. Next, we've got Songcrafter Mage for a green, a blue, and a red mana. You get a human bard. That's a 3/2 with flash. And when this creature enters the battlefield, target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard gains Harmonize until end of turn. Its Harmonize cost is equal to its mana cost. So I like the premise of this card. 3/2 with flash, and then you can get a spell from your graveyard that's an instant or sorcery and play it on that turn. The downside of this in my mind is, well, what if I'm having to cast this on turn 3? Well, I can't play an instant or sorcery. So this is a card that I definitely don't think is a 4 of in any decks, but maybe a copy or two might fit into a deck where you're using a lot of instants and sorceries over the course of a game, and then in the mid to late game you can go get one of those back and play that again with Songcrafter Mage's ability here. But outside of that, I really don't see it seeing a ton of standard play. Next, we've got Corey Steel Cutter for 1 and a red mana. You get an artifact, that's an equipment. An equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has trample and haste, and an equipped cost is 1 and a red mana. It also has flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, you get to create a 1/1 white monk creature token with prowess. You may attach this equipment to it. So really nice ability here on Corey Steel Cutter. You don't immediately get the benefit of having a creature that it automatically attaches to, but if you play a second spell on that turn, then you get to create your 1/1 monk and automatically attach it, making that a 2/2 with prowess. And then if you're getting another spell off or something, then now it's a 3/3. So I think this definitely has the ability to be a value piece in standard, and I'm not sure if it goes in the mono red deck at this point, because almost everything has haste anyway, so that's not helpful. But what I do like about it is the trample. Giving red creatures trample is very powerful in standard. Obviously Monstrous Rage does this very well, but this could be another way of getting that trample onto one of your creatures. Next, we've got a couple lower rarity cards to talk about, and the first is Loxodon Battle Priest for 4 and a white mana. You get an Elephant Cleric, that's a 3/5, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Definitely a good limited card. Probably not going to see any standard play, but I'd want this in a limited deck because that +1/+1 counter every turn when you go to combat is a really solid ability in limited. All right, and our last two cards of the day are Glacial Dragon Hunt and Kishla Trawlers. So Glacial Dragon Hunt, for a blue and a red mana, you get a sorcery where you get to draw a card, and then you may discard a card. When you discard a non-land card this way, Glacial Dragon Hunt deals 3 damage to target creature. So, basically this is a 2 mana, draw a card, and hopefully do 3 damage to something. So it's at sorcery speed, so it's a lightning bolt type ability, but you have to discard something. And again, we've got the Mako and a couple other cards from Ether Drift that value you discarding cards. So I think in that style of deck, this is a card I would want to consider as a good removal piece, and it's a way to discard something and get those counters. It also has Harmonize for 4, a blue and a red mana, and you can cast this from your graveyard for its Harmonized cost. And again, you may tap a creature you control to reduce that spell's cost by X, where X is its power, then exile this spell. All right, so I think this definitely has an outside chance of seeing standard play, but it probably has to go into an Izzet deck that is going to want those specific discard and draw abilities. Last card of the day is Kishla Trawlers for 2 and a blue mana. You get a Human Citizen, that's a 3/2, and when this creature enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. When you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So I think this is a good limited card, a way to get an instant or sorcery back, but probably isn't quite good enough for standard. All right, that's day 7 of Tarkir Dragonstorm Spoilers. Thanks for staying to the end of the video. And remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Tarkir Dragonstorm season and beyond. And I put a link to the entire Tarkir Dragonstorm preview series I've done so far, so take a look at any of the ones you didn't get a chance to, and please leave a comment, and that helps us grow the channel. Thanks. I will see you in the next one.